Today we rank all the Poppy Playtime characters from least scariest to the most scariest character. So without further ado, let's get straight into the video. So the least scariest character in Poppy Playtime is Kissy Missy. For one, Kissy Missy doesn't really show any signs of being hostile toward the player. She actually kind of helps us in chapter 2 by opening the gate for us, and in chapter 3 she doesn't end up eating us, so it's showing that she isn't really much of a threat. So as a player, I don't really find her scary, but then again, what we've seen in the end of chapter 3, she may become a bit more of a threat in the chapters leading onward. So let's move on to the next spot, which is Bonso Bunny. Bonso is a little bit creepier, as first of all, Bonso is a threat, so I mean that's already bonus points there. And also when Bonso is going to attack the player, Bonso will like slap his cymbals together, so that is an indicator that you are probably gonna die. Also, the design for Bonso is just really off-putting, but let's move on to the next spot, which is the small Huggies. They're pretty much Huggy Waggy, but extremely small. They're still scary. I mean, they come out of these really dark tunnels, which can be very off-putting to the player. Also, their jump scares are completely terrifying. They rip your face off, which I mean doesn't sound that appealing. So yeah, these little guys mean business. You do not want to mess with a small Huggy. So let's take Huggy Wuggy, who is pretty terrifying, and let's just make it a little bit smaller. So that's where you get the small Huggies. They're not that scary, but yeah, let's just move on. Next are the smiling critters from the Playhouse section in chapter 3. These are overall, they're pretty terrifying when they're in numbers because they like to hunt in numbers, so that can become a little bit more intimidating. But if you're face to face with just one of them, I mean, they're already scared of your flare gun, so that already makes them a little bit more unscary, if that even is a word. But the smiling critters are overall, they're terrifying in numbers, but individually they're manageable. It's just this scene from the Hour of Joy that always makes me just hate these things. Like imagine like 20 of them jumping on you and eating you. I mean, that is some terrifying stuff, and it already makes me fear these little things even more, so yeah. Alright, so next is PJ Pugapillar, and PJ overall is pretty intimidating. Look, he's a big fella, right? I mean, design wise, it's just a massive dog. For me, it's just PJ's eyes. I mean, they're just empty, very dull. Like, there's nothing that signifies that this thing is remotely sane. And when PJ actually hunts down the player, it's some terrifying stuff, and it makes PJ one of the most intimidating characters you can find in Poppy Playtime. Next up is Mummy Longlegs, and this character is kind of just like a massive toy spider. And I don't really like spiders that much, so you can imagine that a toy spider, especially the size of Mummy Longlegs, is definitely gonna make me a little bit squeamish. And the worst part about Mummy Longlegs is when she goes into danger mode, and this happens during chapter 2 at the end, and it's a very freaky scene. Also, the sounds she makes during her chase is very disturbing, and I find that Mummy Longlegs is a very overall decently scary character. Next is Boxy Boo, and Boxy Boo is just this really massive Jack-in-the-Box creature who will use this tune, and when that tune stops, it will just open up this inside monster and you're dead at that point. Not much to say about Boxy Boo beside it's a pretty terrifying thing to come across. I mean, if Lethal Company didn't make it clear that Jack-in-the-Box creatures are not to be trusted, it's pretty much the same principle but in Poppy Playtime. Just don't go near this thing when it starts to play its music, because you're probably gonna die. Alright, next is Huggy Wuggy, and this thing is just terrifying. A tall, slender creature who is full of hair, and the worst part is when you get picked up and eaten. That is the worst part about Huggy Wuggy. The fact that it is a massive creature, it is able to pick you up and eat you very quickly is a very terrifying thing to think about. And the vent chase is just brilliant. It's a terrifying scene that encapsulates that Huggy Wuggy nightmare feel that a lot of people still have after that really terrifying chase in chapter 1. It fully cements Huggy as an absolute force of nature and is why I fear Huggy a little bit more than the rest of the characters. Next is Nightmare Huggy, because you can imagine if I don't like Huggy Wuggy, then the nightmare version in chapter 3 isn't gonna make things any better. And what do you know? I don't like the nightmare version. It's just a more larger version of Huggy mixed with having more teeth, and the thing just looks like it shouldn't exist. And the way it gets out of the TV and chases the player down at very high speeds makes it a very terrifying creature to come across. Definitely one of the most scariest moments in chapter 3 by far. Next is Catnap. And Catnap is a massive cat with a very massive body that is very creepy. Again, like PJ, it's the eyes. Those eyes make me very scared. There's nothing behind the eyes. It's just emptiness. Like Catnap is just empty. And it shows in chapter 3 when Catnap is constantly chasing us and all I see are those massive eyes. It's just not good. And then the nightmare version of Catnap, an even creepier version, and this one is even worse. It's just everything Catnap but intensified and this massive creature. I mean, Catnap itself is already scary, so making a nightmare version makes things just a lot worse. Also, in the Hour of Joy, I just can't get over the fact Catnap just absolutely smacked a worker like 15 feet. That's insane. Catnap is just an absolute beast and shouldn't be trusted. Let's move on. Alright, so the number 1 spot for today is Miss Delight. Okay, your average scary teacher. And she is definitely one of the creepiest designs I've seen in a mascot horror game. The face feels like it's human-like, but at the same time, it's not human. You can tell it's not human. A human doesn't do what Miss Delight does, and the way she screams at the player, it just gives this really creepy vibe that I don't want to even describe. And her whole mechanic is pretty much when you stare at her, she stays still, but when you run away from her, she chases you. I mean, that is just insane. Her backstory is also very dark and depressing, and I just can't get over just her creepiness. She's a very creepy character. So that's it for this video. If you have enjoyed, smash a like, and if you are new around here and enjoy the content, then please subscribe to the channel. And until next time, take it easy and goodbye.